Welcome to the deep dive. Ever feel like you're just buried under complex documents, wishing there was a way to get to the real story faster? Today, that's exactly what we're tackling. You've given us two sources that seem, well, pretty unrelated at first glance. We've got a dense corporate financial letter from Wesco Financial Corporation, and then, kind of out of left field, a guide called The Podcaster's Playbook, which is full of questions for interviews. So, our mission for this deep dive is to show you how a structured set of questions, like the ones in that playbook, can be this surprisingly powerful tool, a lens maybe for pulling out key insights and understanding the narrative hidden inside something as, frankly, dry seeming as a shareholder letter. It's really about getting to the why and how, not just, the what.
Yeah, it's a great way to show that really learning something isn't just about soaking up facts, right? It's more about knowing how to ask the right questions, questions that get to the deeper meaning, the context. What's really interesting here is seeing how a framework from like podcasting can actually shed light on finance, helps you see past just the surface numbers.
Okay, so let's unpack this Wesco financial snapshot then. Our main document is their letter to shareholders. It's dated February 27, 2007, and it covers the 2006 calendar year. And like I said, you look at it first, and these big numbers just sort of leap off the page.
They really do. The letter says consolidated net operating income, and they put operating in quotes. It saw a pretty healthy jump, went up to about $92 million or $12.93 per share. In 2006, that was up from around $78 million, $10.95 a share back in 2005. So far, so good. But here's the kicker, and it really makes you ask, why? Why did their overall consolidated net income actually plummet? It went from this massive $295 million in 2005 way down to that same $92 million in 2006. Big difference.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. And it's just a perfect example of why we need to dig deeper, ask those questions. The letter itself explains it. That huge 2005 net income number, it included a $216.6 million after-tax realized investment gain. But crucially, this wasn't cash. It was almost all from a non-cash, tax-free swap of Gillette shares for Procter & Gamble shares during a merger. And Wesco itself says, quote, "This accounting entry had no economic effect on Wesco, and you should ignore it when you're evaluating Wesco's 2005 earnings." Explicit.
Absolutely. And that highlights such a critical point, really, for anyone looking at financials. You got to understand the difference between, let's say, accounting rules and the actual economic reality on the ground. The letter helps by giving this extra breakdown of earnings. It explains the results from Wesco's four main subsidiaries, which gives us a much clearer picture. So you've got Wesco Financial Insurance Company, WesFIX, it's mostly reinsurance. Then the Kansas Bankers Surety Company, Kansas Bankers. They do insurance mainly for banks in the Midwest. Court Business Services Corporation, Court T, that's furniture rental. And finally, Precision Steel Warehouse, Inc., or Precision Steel, which is, well, steel warehousing.
Right. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of it? It means you absolutely have to look past those big, flashy top-line numbers. You need to dig into the stories of these individual businesses to really get what was going on with Wesco. Okay. Now that we've got a handle on the basic numbers and that initial financial quirk, let's bring in our other source, our analytical lens, if you will. You might be thinking, how on earth do general personal and life questions from a podcaster's playbook, questions like what inspired your journey or biggest challenge faced, how did those apply to a company? But surprisingly, they can actually unlock some really crucial insights into Wesco's history, its resilience.
It's really quite fascinating how you can reframe them. Take Kansas Bankers, for example. Wesco bought them in '96. The letter mentions it was chartered way, way back in 1909, started off underwriting deposit insurance for Kansas banks, and it's had to evolve its services over like a century to meet changing needs. I mean, that's its corporate journey right there. And for biggest challenge, we'll look no further than Court. Wesco buys them in February 2000 thinking, growth is going to be fast. Then bam, the dot-com bubble bursts. Then 9/11 hits and there's this big business slowdown. The letter is blunt. It says this hammered Court's operations, calls it a bad result for the whole rent-to-rent sector.
Wow. Yeah, hammered is strong language for a shareholder letter. That's a huge challenge. A lot of businesses might just, shrink or fold under that kind of pressure. So how did Court deal with it? What does the letter say about their response?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. The letter talks about Court Terry starting a new service in 2001 called Relocation Central. Now it's the Court line. The idea was to add services around the furniture rental, like helping relocating people find apartments, other related services. Later, they expanded that to businesses and government agencies too. So it shows real adaptation. It's not just about surviving the challenge. It reveals maybe a company culture that's willing to admit, okay, that didn't work, and then pivot pretty aggressively. That's valuable and often hidden.
Yeah. Definitely. And then you mentioned Precision Steel, too. What was their story?
Right, Precision Steel. They faced a different kind of pressure. The letter calls it a long-term reduction in demand. Why? Because their customers, or maybe former customers, couldn't compete effectively with manufacturers outside the U.S. globalization hitting home. Their sales volume dropped significantly from 69 million pounds in '99 down to 46 million in 2006. The letter calls that a serious reverse and says it's not likely to just bounce back. But interestingly, they specifically credit the president and CEO, Terry Piper, say he did an outstanding job leading through these very difficult years, despite forces largely outside his control.
So that shows leadership even when the overall trend is negative. Interesting. All right, so we've looked at Wesco's sort of origin stories, its journey, and some major challenges. Let's shift focus a bit to their strategy, their outlook. Our playbook's business and entrepreneurship questions seem perfect here. Like, how do you define success? Or maybe, what's one mistake you made that taught a valuable lesson?
Well, Wesco's letter actually kind of defines success its own way, not just by the standard audited financials. They provide that supplementary breakdown we talked about, focusing on operating earnings before those big one-off investment gains. They explicitly call this breakdown useful to shareholders. So that's what they seem to see as real success, the underlying business performance. It's a more honest view, perhaps. And as for mistakes, they're incredibly direct about Court. The letter says, quote, "When we purchased Court, we were poor predictors of near-term industry-wide prospects of the rent-to-rent sector of the furniture business." I mean, that's about as clear an admission of a misjudgment as you'll ever see in a corporate report. And it directly led to that strategic shift with Court line. Reminds you of that Munger idea, right? Tell me where I'm going to die so I don't go there. Admitting the Court mistake feels like that kind of thinking.
That's really candid. Okay, let's move to investing and finance questions from the playbook. A key one is obviously, what's your investment philosophy? Seems tailor-made for this document.
Absolutely. And the letter gives us a pretty unique glimpse into Wesco's thinking, particularly about deferred income taxes. It's a bit technical, but stick with me. Because Wesco carries its investments at fair market value, and those unrealized gains are part of shareholders' equity, they effectively have what they call an interest-free loan from the government. This loan is basically equal to the taxes they would owe if they sold those appreciated investments. At the end of 2006, this amounted to roughly $42 per Wesco share.
$42 a share in an interest-free loan from the government. That's significant.
It's huge. And asking about their philosophy helped uncover how they view this accounting detail as a real capital advantage. It gives them flexibility. But they're careful. The letter notes it's not a perpetual advantage. The loan disappears if they actually sell the securities and pay the tax. Still, while they hold, it's a big benefit.
Okay, that makes sense. What else did the letter reveal about their investment thinking?
Well, they also mention having over $1 billion parked in cash equivalents and fixed maturity investments since early 2003. A huge pile of cash. And they express this concern, this worry, that future returns on shareholders' equity will probably be less than those of the past unless they can find ways to reinvest that cash attractively.
So that prompts a question for you, the listener, doesn't it? About capital allocation. What do you do with all that cash? Opportunity cost.
Exactly. And perhaps even more revealing is their very frank comparison of Wesco to Berkshire Hathaway. Remember, Munger is chairman of Wesco and vice chairman of Berkshire. Wesco states quite clearly it's not an equally good but smaller version of Berkshire Hathaway. That's pretty blunt. They go on to say that each dollar of book value at Wesco continues plainly to provide much less intrinsic value than a similar dollar of book value at Berkshire Hathaway.
Wow. So they're saying a dollar on Berkshire's books is fundamentally worth more than a dollar on Wesco's books because of the quality of the underlying assets or earning power.
Precisely. And they even admit this quality disparity has, in recent years, continued to widen.
That level of self-awareness, that candid self-assessment is just incredibly rare in corporate communications. Usually it's all positive spin.
Very rare indeed.
Okay, so finally, let's try applying the playbook's fun and personal favorites questions. Sounds a bit weird for a company, I know. But questions like, what's a fun fact most people don't know about you, can sometimes reveal, company's character, its quirks. You might think finance is just dry spreadsheets, but this letter actually has some surprisingly human, almost quirky details.
Oh, absolutely. This brings us to my favorite little nugget, the story about Wesco's stock listing. It's wonderfully revealing. For years, apparently, they were listed on the Pacific Exchange and happily paid what they call a minimal annual listing fee of $1,000. Pocket change for a company this size. But then, NYSE Arca, which took over the Pacific Exchange, decided to hike that fee up to $30,000 a year. And Wesco, they just voted with its feet, as the letter says, and delisted. They stayed only on the American Stock Exchange, which presumably had lower fees.
They dropped an exchange listing over, what, $29,000?
Seems like it. It's such a small detail in the grand scheme, but it speaks volumes about their approach. Intensely practical, super cost-conscious, very hands-on, just a unique attitude you don't often see.
That is pretty revealing. Any other sort of fun facts lurking in there?
Well, there's a very tangible one. The letter mentions a small real estate subsidiary, MS Property Company. Apparently, it was building a multi-story luxury condo building right next door to Wesco's headquarters in Pasadena, California. And they were seeking approval for another one. And get this, the chairman, Charlie Munger himself, includes a phone number right there in the shareholder letter for anyone interested in very high-end condominium inquiries.
No way! A phone number in the shareholder letter for condo sales. That's unexpected.
Right. And almost as an aside, they also mentioned they increased their regular dividend, just slightly, from 36.5 cents to 37.5 cents per share. Small details, but they add color.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for you listening in? We started with these two very different things. A detailed, maybe slightly intimidating financial report, and this list of interview questions from a podcaster's playbook. By using those questions, not literally, but as a kind of framework, a way to probe, we managed to peel back the layers of this corporate document. We got beyond just the numbers to understand the challenges Wesco faced, the strategies they used, even some of the unique personality of the company. Who knew a shareholder letter could tell you about stock listing fights or condo sales?
Yeah, we saw how digging into specifics like court struggles after the dot-com bust and how they adapted, or precision steel fighting global competition, or Wesco's really unique view on deferred taxes as that interest-free loan, or even that decision to delist over 30 grand. All these pieces create a much richer picture. It really underscores that deep diving into information isn't just passive consumption. It's about active questioning, looking for the stories, the whys, the lessons hidden inside. So maybe the final thought, the key takeaway for you is this. How else could you use a structured set of questions, maybe from an unexpected place or any kind of analytical framework, really? How could you use that to deep dive into the information you encounter every day, to move beyond just getting the facts, to truly understanding the narratives, the implications, the stories that are waiting to be uncovered?